conversation with Karie Kaufmann, which I recorded on 10th of January 2022. We touch on a whole load of things to help you understand how to strategically plan your business, but also create a vision for the future. And I asked Karie one of the questions around what's the biggest thing that drives people to want to coach. And what she said is, it's that combination of dissatisfaction and vision. Dissatisfaction and vision. Because some people are dissatisfied with the progress they're making in their business, or they've got a vision of what they want and they're not getting it, or they haven't got a vision at all and they realize they need to step up and do something different. So she talks there about how do you create a theme, and that theme could be a longer term theme or a short term theme of 90 days. But once you create your theme in place, you can start working to resolve the dissatisfaction or build your vision, or both. And I think that's a lovely thing to do. Karie also talks a lot around how do you go about putting in place the systems to enable you to step back from the business, to enable other people to step up. And one of the last questions I asked her was around how do you do that? And she said, actually focus on the team. And to me, that's the key thing. You can't build a business without a team. Well, you could build a one-person business, but actually if you want to build a real team and a real business, you need to put the value in that team, empower them, trust them, give them responsibility, and understand what skills do you need in the business that they can bring so that you can effectively step back and relinquish authority and responsibility for certain things to give you more time to do those things. Even if it's just putting one small thing in the diary at a time, you can start building that. Enjoy the show. And if you want to connect with Karie, you'll hear the details at the end. It's a great conversation and a great start of a 2022 that I think we should all come back to listen to on a regular basis. So welcome to the Sparks by Ignium podcast. I'm Phil Rose, the host, and today I'm delighted to be joined at the beginning of 2022 by Karie Kaufmann. Karie is an executive and business coach. She's a certified scaling up and action coach. She also holds qualifications in DISC and EI, which we might talk about later. Karie and I have never actually met. We've talked through the last period of time or since I've been a scaling up coach. So I'm delighted to welcome her to the show now, because there's lots of conversation that I want to have around how do you build a business, how do you scale, how do you involve your ownership, and how do you actually engage your team for the future. So welcome to the Sparks by Ignium podcast, Karie.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. It's nice to see you. We're having this on a cold January evening in the UK, and it's a warm January morning in San Diego. So welcome.
That's right. Yeah.
So we mentioned about scaling up an action coach. You've been coaching for some time now. Can you just give a little bit about your background? Where have you come from? How did you get into this coaching world?
Yeah. So I have been a coach since 2005.
Wow.
And I got into it. I kind of got mixed up in this a bit by accident, I suppose. And it started because I grew up in a family business. So I worked in the family business for a long time. My dad still owns the business, operates it remotely, but he had bought some companies and sold some companies. And I got a lot of great business experience at a young age that I completely underappreciated because I thought I was too big for the family business. I wanted to move on. So I got my master's in business. I moved into the corporate world, was working in corporate level marketing, and a friend of mine, just a colleague in the office, a buddy, walks into my office one day, and I was working here in San Diego. And he said, I met somebody that does something I think you'd be good at. And he introduced me to a business coach. Now that was in 2004. I had never even heard the term business coaching. And I was like, is that a real job? What do they do? So, but when I met his friend, and it clicked with me really quickly, because I felt like I could help people like my dad, who was a successful guy. But I also saw the back end of that, right? I saw the constant tension between wanting to build your business to what you know you're capable of, and also wanting to make it home in time for dinner with the family, right? And that constant balance and tension. But I had gone on and developed, education and professional experience that I felt like I could help people like my dad. So I took, several months, almost a year, to kind of really dig into it and learn more about it. And then I jumped in 2005 and have never looked back.
Wow.
And complete that story, my dad actually was a client of mine for about 3 years. Yeah. Yep. He paid me and everything.
Well, and I'd love to ask how that worked out, because I have a very similar story from my business. So before I carry on, how did it work out working with your dad?
It worked out well. So I was not his first business coach.
Okay.
He had actually heard of coaching. He was kind of key for me getting into the industry because he already had a sense of familiarity and validated that it was a really helpful thing for his business.
Yeah.
So he had been well trained by some excellent coaches prior to working with me. But he came to me one day and he goes, well, you know me, you know my hangups, you know how I am, and I'd like for you to coach me, kind of to get through this next phase, which was an honor.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we coached each other because he's still one of my key business and life mentors as well. So it was mutually beneficial for sure.
Well, I love that story. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because you said right at the beginning there, you didn't know this thing called business coaching. I started my business in 2004, and I didn't call myself a coach specifically because there were lots of life coaches around in the UK at that time. I'd just come out of the corporate world, and the word consultant was what I knew. I didn't know of business coaching. So I called myself a consultant for the first few years. And it wasn't until 2008, which I discovered, actually, I'd been coaching all the time. I just didn't know it was coaching at the time. I still thought it was consulting, but I realized there was something else there, which is this coaching world, but it hadn't clicked for me. That's what it was. So I was late to the party in calling myself a coach. But the other bit that really resonated with me as well is, you talk about your father. My parents ran their own business. They sold it in 2010. And my dad won't listen to this, so I can say this now. But actually, if I could have gone back to 1982 when they started their business and helped them build their business, I'm pretty sure we could have built a better business. Because actually, you said about making it home in time for dinner. That was a tough call for a lot of my father, and my mother worked in the business as well. So I was brought up with them working in the business Monday through Saturday. And Sunday they generally have off, but if we went on holiday, they were always on the phone back to the office to check things were okay. So they never got away from it. And I wish I could have gone back now with what I now know to help them do something differently.
Yeah, I know so many coaches that's our story, that it's so personal to us, and we intimately know what it's like, the good and the bad, like the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. Yeah. So we become very passionate about knowing that they did a lot of things right. But there's also things that we could improve on.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think exactly. I think my dad was a brilliant, and I use the word technician. My dad was an engineer. He was a marine engineer, so he knew everything it was to do about boats. He could take an engine apart, put it back together, and make it go faster. And the business worked really well for 30 years. But it was very much a lifestyle business with a number of employees. But I think you're right. He knew how to make it work, and there were some great things come out of it. But actually, the lasting value is the bit that I really want to help him, because he never managed to scale it in the way that I would call scaling it today.
Of course, yeah.
So that journey for you in that case, getting back into, coming into coaching 2005. What was it like back in those early days of coaching for you in terms of working with clients?
Well, nobody like me, nobody else knew what coaching was either. So it was just a completely new experience. And I started out working in a private firm, and I went independent. Kind of a bit of a jaunt from the story is I had quit that position in 2007 because my husband and I had a goal. We wanted to live in a foreign country for a year. So we both quit our jobs and sold everything. We wanted to move to Barcelona for a year. And then when we came back is when I started the business I have now, and did it privately in my independent practice.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
So I was still educating people on what coaching is. There was a bit of a stigma around it in my experience that coaching was for broken businesses. Yeah. That people who, if you need a coach, then you must be in bad shape. Yeah. And now I don't find that to still really exist, at least not in great form. I'm sure it still does with some people. But now I find that people are a lot more proactive, realizing that every business needs a coach, just like every professional athlete has a coach. Yeah. That it's something that good businesses do to get better, and healthy businesses do to get healthier, be more scalable or more sustainable, or as I like to put it, if it's a business owner, that the business works for them instead of them working for it. Yeah. So I have definitely seen a shift in kind of the adoption or perception of coaching, receiving coaching, what it means to be coached, is wonderful. right? A lot more understood and accepted.
And I think it's really true. Is that I went to a seminar pre-COVID pandemic with Eric Schmidt from Google, and he was talking about, they were just releasing their book called $1 Trillion Coach. And one of the things he said in that, and it's a well-known phrase, that when he joined Google, one of the best things he ever had was having a coach. And he worked with this gentleman who actually turned out to be working with Google and with Apple and with other businesses as well. And if you haven't read the book, it's worth going to look at $1 Trillion.
I have, yeah. It's a great book.
Story. It is. But I still think that thing that Eric Schmidt said, the best thing he had was having a coach, someone who could work with him. But in the past, people had seen it as the remedial class. They didn't think coaching was to help them become even better. And I've always used that phrase around, the greatest sports stars in the world have always had coaches. In fact, they've had more than one coach. They've had a number of coaches to help them do all the different things they do. But in business, people didn't used to do it. So I think it's fascinating to hear that you getting into that in 2005 as well. And then 2007, creating this latest introduction to what you do as well. So it's an interesting world, this world of coaching. So tell me, you've been in it before, and you've mentioned about scaling up an action coach. When did you get involved in the scaling up world and the action coach? Which came first?
Action coach was first. I got certified an action coach in 2009, and scaling up came much later, 2017. Actually, it was just my 4-year anniversary of beginning the certification process just in the last couple of months.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm definitely newer to scaling up comparatively speaking, but it was kind of an evolution, I think, of my business, because the types of work and the types of businesses, and as my clients started to grow and needed a bit more sophistication with regards to their frameworks and how they looked at scalability, and how can you really scale up and really replicate without the wheels falling off, right? And I refer to it like, I think of it like a speed wobble. Like if you've ever ridden a bicycle or a skateboard downhill, like you really pick up speed and you get that little bit of a wobble going, and it's kind of fun and kind of thrilling. Yeah. As long as you don't die, right? Like you're also very precarious, and things could really go wrong. And I feel like that's where scale ups can tend to lie, right? There's this bit of a knife edge between, wow, we're growing really fast, that we're on the verge of losing control. And losing control could mean that we outgrow our cash. It could mean that our culture gets compromised. Could mean that the founder of the company goes to work and they don't even recognize the company anymore. Could mean they just kind of lose their way with regards to their position in the marketplace. Like it could be a lot of different things that result in that feeling, but it's just kind of knowing like things are going a bit too fast and we're having a hard time keeping up. And as Vern Harnish, the founder of Scaling Up, would say, more businesses die of indigestion than starvation. Right. So it's too much of a good thing sometimes can be the business's peril. And that's where I think scaling up comes in to provide the frameworks to make it scalable and you can enjoy the ride while, continuing to be strategic and not get to the next phase, which is commonly called, you go from scale up to screw up. Right. Which I avoid that.
And I think it's interesting that speed wall. I can relate to that. I ride a bike regularly, and for me, we've got a hill very close here, and I know that feeling of you going downhill and you want to put your hands on the brakes to slow the business down or the bike down because it just feels a bit too dangerous. But then you also want to let it fly as well. And I think for a business owner, I've not thought of that speed wall point, that you do get to a point in your journey where you've got everything running, but you feel like you're spinning lots and lots of plates in the air, and one of them's going to drop. And that's the hard bit, I think, for the business owner, is trying to work out, because I was saying the businesses that we come across in the work I've done as well, they're often perfectly designed to get the results they've got today.
Exactly.
And that's one of the biggest issues, that they don't know how to get the results they really need.
Exactly.
So from your perspective in that case, what's the common thing that people wake up in the morning and say, I need help? Do they say, I need a coach? Or are they looking at some other issue in their business? They say, this is what's presenting, and therefore what comes first? Need a coach or suffering from a problem?
I think it's both. There's the two reasons why people change are the carrot and the stick, right? They're dissatisfied meaning there's known problems or constraints that they know they need to solve it, or they need to remove whatever is kind of preventing them from growing. Or it could be the vision, that the dissatisfaction might be low, meaning I've got a nice business. Things are working well. They're working okay for the most part. Of course, there's always fine tuning that could happen, but I know we're capable of more. I really want to get to this point. And maybe they want to be able to sell the business someday. They want to hit some milestone. They have some big, hairy, audacious goal they're going for. And they know that the business has to kind of evolve or reinvent itself in order to get to that next level. I think most time it really is a combination. I think it's a multiplying effect, the dissatisfaction and the vision, because if you have the biggest vision in the world, but if you're pretty comfortable with where you're at, you're like, actually things are pretty okay. I'm making good money and, not working myself to the bone. Like, are you really going to throw yourself into the unknown of taking that next leap? And the opposite is also true. You could be really dissatisfied and frustrated, but if you don't have a vision that's compelling you to what you believe and what you want the business to look like instead, you'll kind of live in frustration, right? So I guess both is the answer.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I love your thing about the dissatisfied and the vision, having that balance between the two. Because one thing I often find with business, and I don't know if you've seen the same, is they often are not sure what their vision is. They just keep doing, and they've not thought about where that future of the business could go because they're so stuck in it. They don't have time to come up above the parapet and think, "Oh, where are we going?" Exactly. And that's one of the biggest issues. So creating that vision and understanding what's that thing they're aiming at, I think, is one of the big things I've seen as well.
What are you going for? 10% better than last year? I don't know, just kind of arbitrarily, picking that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's something
that's pretty. It has a bunch of zeros at the end of it. And, that's the goal. Yeah.
and I think this is the thing, we're recording this, it's 10th of January now. And I think one of the things, looking forward across the year, people actually, we often come in, everyone makes their New Year's resolutions to some degree over New Year. They think about what they're doing. And we always joke that most of those New Year's resolutions have failed by the end of the first week because they've got back into the way of doing things. So I wonder what thoughts have you got and what tips can you give people around building that vision for the future and actually getting into that strategic? Because I think there's always this element of, visioning and then the strategy to make it happen. So I wonder if you've got any tips that you could share with people around creating that vision and making it last.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point because there is actually a specific day, and I think it's January 17th, that's known as the Ditch Day. It's the date by which at least in America, that most Americans have ditched their resolutions by that date. And I think for some, it might be the 2nd of January, but that's true. And having the compelling goals and the clear plans is critical to get through the times when you would otherwise get trapped by the day-to-day. So for example, I had a client, this is actually last January, but we were probably right about 10 days into the new year. And we had a coaching session and she said, absolutely nothing is going according to the plan so far. And they had, I think one person quit, somebody I don't remember, it was COVID, but they were out unexpectedly. While they were poised to have this gangbusters launch to the year, everything went sideways instead. And she was kind of faced with getting drawn back into just meeting the day-to-day demands of the business or making a choice that I'm going to stay the course with the plan. And of course it was a bit of a negotiation and even a bit of a hybrid because there were some legitimate day-to-day responsibilities that needed to be covered by people who were out unexpectedly, but to not abandon the plan entirely. So, as much as I'd like to take credit for it, she'd be the person to tell you, coaching actually really helped her in that because it gave her the perspective and the accountability to say, okay, what can I do? Can I still take 1 or 2 hours this week to do something that my future self will thank me for, to do something proactive in the business and not just serve the demands of this day or this month, and to keep that focus and not let it go. One other thing I've had a lot of success with personally, as well as some of my clients, this is going to sound a bit simple,
Right.
is setting a theme for the year.
Okay. Tell me more.
For a lot of my clients, they'll set a theme quarterly as it relates to the team. But personally, what I do is I'll pick my word or my phrase for the year.
Yeah.
That the question I wanted to answer is, when the year is over and I'm looking back and I've had a great year, what will it have been about? What's the one word or the short phrase that best describes what the year was like for me? And one of the most impactful themes I picked for a year was a few years ago, and it was my theme was create space.
Nice.
I was at a point in my business that I had a good business. It was full. I didn't have room for a lot more clients, but I wanted to grow, which meant saying no to things you don't like is easy. Saying no to good things is much harder.
Yeah.
So that theme of creating space really challenged me throughout the entire year. I held on to that theme. That's like, just because it's a good opportunity doesn't mean I need to take it. I need to create the space. And if I'm going to create space for new things, that means I need to let go of some things. I need to decline some opportunities, to say no to the good, to leave room for the great. And I mean, I could tell more stories about clients who have done that, but has been helpful for me over several years to kind of have that, call it a mantra, call it a theme, focus, whatever, put whatever word you want to it. But it was challenging in keeping my priorities in order.
And I think that's the key bit, isn't it? It's the prioritization and hoping you keep focused on it. Because if you've got a theme of creating space, I often use words setting the context, but same thing in terms of, okay, what's the theme you're working towards? And I just want to go back a little bit. You said about, getting to the end of the year and looking back over the year and say, okay, what's the thing that's enabled me to do this over this period of time? I often do a lot of visioning work with clients to help them step out into the future, to understand, okay, if it was now the 10th of January 2023 and we're having this conversation, what would have to have happened in the previous 12 months to enable you to get to this point where you've created space or whatever it is as well? And I think that really helps people step back. Some people find it really difficult. Some people find it hard to step into that future space and look back along the timeline of where they've come from. But I think it's a really powerful tool to actually say, okay, what have I done? What's enabled me to get to this point in time, 1 year down the line, look back along it and say, what have I done? What have I achieved? And looking at the peaks and the troughs of the year that have made you get to where you are.
Yeah, it is hard to do, which is why most people don't do it.
Yeah, very true.
Right.
And I love that. I love that thing. It is hard, but we know the value that comes from it. And I think that the bit about creating a theme really drives it, because then you've got something to anchor you in, to say this is why we're doing it. This is what we've done, and I can see what we're trying to achieve. Yeah. So come back to that point around you mentioned there about ditch day, and I love that. I've not seen that as January 17th. I love that, because a lot of people do get very hung up on creating some resolution at the beginning of the year, but they don't do it from a point of view of what the real reason is. They don't understand their full why of doing it. And I think that's a big piece for a lot of companies or a lot of individuals, to understand why bother, and why do we need to create space? So how would you go about enabling someone to come up with a theme such as creating space? What's the words you would use with them to help them get clear on what that thing is?
That the driving question is, like you just said, putting yourself at the end of the year, looking backwards. Sometimes some of the ways we get there are through maybe it's a collection of, I call them driving thoughts.
Okay.
Which is, what are the constant thoughts or reminders you want to shape your thinking throughout the year? And oftentimes it might be a quote, it might be even a catchphrase, right? That kind of helps to develop what the theme might be, and it keeps clarity on the goal. So for example, I've got a handful of them. One of mine is a quote from Jim Rohn that's, life is a collection of experiences.
Nice.
And that's constantly shaping, like, am I going to say yes to my kids when they want to play a silly game when I'd really rather be doing something else? Am I going to take this trip? Am I going to take this client? Like, what's the experience like? What am I collecting what learning or what fun or, good, bad, or indifferent. It's just collecting experiences. So even during the hard times, the challenging times, like what's the experience I'm going to collect from this? Because I might as well make it worth something, right? If you're going to go through the hard time, you might as well get some benefit from it.
I love that.
So that's been helpful for me, is kind of collecting some of these quotes or thoughts. One of my clients shared one with me that I really liked. That's big doors swing on small hinges, right? And so for her, that was about the little things. She was really focused on the daily disciplines, not just the big goals, but like, what's the small things I need to do every single day, whether it's making sure I'm getting exercise or drinking enough water, to making sure I'm planning my day and prioritizing before I begin, just the small daily rituals that compound and lead to great success. So sometimes breaking it down into things like that can be inspiring or clarifying, or what are just the things that you read or you think about that grab onto you, that challenge you, that might help somebody get closer and closer to the theme for the year. Or if the theme for the year is too much, make it a theme for the quarter, which for the team, when you're, there's a bit of a difference with how you're planning for yourself, your personal goals, and you happen to be a CEO versus when you're goal setting with the team, right? You kind of do that at two different levels. So with the team, a quarterly theme usually makes more sense. Easier for people to put their head around, easier to keep energy, momentum, right? A year's a long time. So is that helpful?
No, that's really useful. And the bit I love there about, the CEO having one view on it, but actually then breaking it down into smaller chunks so the team can get hooked into something else as well. So you've got the overriding theme of creating space for the year, but then you've got other themes that the team combine to as well. So I like that.
Exactly.
But I also love that. I love the two phrases you mentioned, the Jim Rohn, the collection of experiences. I love that. And I love that big doors swing on small hinges, because it's those small little rituals we put in place which enable us to get the bigger success. So I'm just going to take that away as a big takeaway anyway, because that's
I don't know who. I'm sure somebody's famous said that, and I don't know who it was. So it wasn't me.
We'll put it to Karie Kaufmann for today. That's lovely.
Yeah.
So interesting, actually, when we're looking at businesses moving through their journey and creating what they want to be doing. I want to come back to something you mentioned just now about when you and your husband decided to go to do something different. You created a vision of doing so, and then you made it happen back in 2007, effectively. How often have you seen business owners struggle to put in that personal change because they've not created a vision of what they want? Is that saying, because you obviously did it, you put it in there and you said, hey, this is what we're going to go and do. Big change, live in a foreign country. We often see it. Have you seen that come up in business owners themselves, and what can they do about it if they want to do something different?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes. I think that the default for a founder especially is that the business comes first, right? So they consider themselves lucky to get a couple holidays in per year, to take some time off. But they have a hard time really setting a big personal goal that actually feels like it robs from the business, meaning that it has to take time away from the business, or make a sacrifice in the business to make it possible. And I don't necessarily believe that has to be true. I don't think they need to be mutually exclusive, meaning I can either have all the business success in the world, or I can pursue personal goals. That being in business should give you more life and not suck the life out of you. But that requires doing the work, right? Getting the systems and the team and the strategy in place so that it can afford you the time to step away, but not waiting until you feel like you've got it all perfect before you start living.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting, isn't it? Not waiting to get it all perfect before you start living. Because I think, as business owners, some business owners do go into business just to make money. But actually, I always say that most people, when they come to talk to me or you, they often want more time, less stress, more money, and more fun. It's those four things. And they may be getting all the money they need, but if they're not having the fun in their business, or they've not got the time to go home and see the partner, the dog, the kids, whatever it is that entertains them, actually they're missing out on what the real reason for setting that business up is. And they don't see that until someone's opened their eyes up to say, hey, you need to think about what else you want in your life.
Right. So some of my clients will start with this relatively small. Like I have a couple clients that have a goal of taking some holiday once per quarter.
Okay.
Even if it's just a 3-day weekend, but forcing themselves to take a small step to actively move away from the business, do something they enjoy, plan something with their families. Others of my clients, it's much bigger. They're at a point where they're able or willing to take more time off or pursue, whether it's a challenge like running a marathon or getting a pilot's license or, learning a new skill, whatever it is. But that they have to have those goals. Like you always have enough time for your priorities. You don't have enough time for everything, but you always have time for what you choose as the priorities, because we all have the same amount of it. But if you don't know what those things are outside of the business, there's not a chance you'll make time for it. Right? There's I guess, belief amongst business owners when it comes to their team is, how long is that task going to take that employee? And the answer is as much time as you give them. Right? If they've got an hour to do it or a day to do it, it's going to fill up the time will expand to fill available space.
Yeah.
So, and your business will expand to take all the time if you don't decide in advance this amount of time is designated for something else. Then it won't be there. The sky will never part, and you won't magically say like, I've got nothing to do next week, I think I'll take a vacation. Like, this is just not going to happen if you don't force it. Right. Plan it ahead.
And I think there's some real power in that, isn't there? That thing about, putting a priorities, because actually, if we make something a priority, we'll do it. And you mentioned about running marathons or taking time out with your partner, doing a 3-day weekend, whatever it might be. But unless you put it in your diary up front, and especially now, it's January, scheduling a year effectively and say, okay, how many days do I want off? How much holiday do I want? How many daytimes do I want with my partner? How many days do I want to go to see the kids? All those things. Unless you make it a priority and put it in there, time expands to fill the space available, as you say. It's a big issue.
Yep. Time and money both. They just grow, right? If businesses, you also see it with their cash, like they get to a place where they make more money, personal finances as well. You make more money, but you don't feel like you have any more money. It's like, because your expenses grow right along with it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It just expands to fill the available space if you don't in advance designate, this money is for investment into the business. This money is for additional distributions, whatever it's going to be for.
But the problem is, and I hear the business owners that I talk to and you talk to as well, they say, yes, but, because they hear us talking like that, but then they come back and say, yes, but I can't afford to take the time off because I'm too busy to do something. So I think this is one of the big things. So how do you coach someone who's in that frame of mind that, yes, but I hear what you're saying, Karie, sounds really good. It's all right for you to say you've got your business set up like that, but I can't do that. I can't take my foot off the gas because the business will stall or anything like that. Because we always hear that from the business owners. What do they need to do to transform their thinking so they can prioritize things and make time for those priorities?
I think you nailed it, that it's transforming the thinking. And it's not simple. Right? It's always multiple facets to it. But the first part is their mindset, that if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
So if you really believe that your business is reliant on you, there's not a chance they're going to develop the skill, let alone the systems or the infrastructure to operate it any other way.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll ask a question like, imagine something happened, like God forbid there's a funeral or something that completely removes you from the business suddenly and unexpectedly for even a few days. Like, what would happen? And most of the time, the answer is they'd figure it out, right? And maybe that actually happened to me last year. I was out with COVID, or I was out for this or that unexpectedly. And maybe things didn't grow. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but they figured it out. Right. Yeah. So kind of deflating, taking a little bit of power away from that lie that it's impossible. So in other words, look for ways to prove yourself wrong. Like to prove that, to challenge that belief that it's impossible, because, well, it is possible, because that happened last year when you did this or that. Or if you had to do it tomorrow, things would work itself out. So let's kind of set that belief aside now and then say, well, now we do have some reality we need to deal with that. Could you do that for more than a couple of days without some consequences? Maybe not. Okay. So what do we need to get in place to make that possible? If it's people, if it's systems, if it's technology, like what's the path to buying back some of your time?
Yeah.
And not letting that law of the vacuum suck it up into other things, right? To be intentional, like I'm going to hire this person, or I'm going to improve this process that should then relieve me of a few hours a week, right?
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to do with that time to be intentional to make sure it doesn't just get absorbed into other busy work in the business?
Yeah.
So maybe you need to, plan that golf morning to get yourself used to taking a few hours a week out of the office, and then kind of build that up to where they can take off more and more.
I love that. And it reminded me as you were talking there, when I set up my first business, and I've mentioned this a few times on this podcast, my accountant back in 2004 gave me a book, and she gave me Michael E. Gerber's book, The E-Myth Revisited. And she said, before you set up your business, read this book. And I still have Sarah, the chocolate maker, in my head there. Yeah, exactly. That's it, because too many people get into business and then they end up hating their business because they're too trapped in it. They may love chocolate at the beginning, but actually they end up hating it because it just consumes their life and they can't see it anymore. And so I love your bit there about, just putting a golf morning in or something simple in, which you can just slowly wean yourself off of it and realize that you can relinquish control to other people. But there's some things you need to do to create the space, to put the systems in place, to empower other people before you have a chance to make it happen in a big way. You've got to put those small steps in, I think, is the key.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that. And I think, you mentioned something as well, one of my other favorite quotes as well, believe you can or believe you can't. Either way, you're probably right. Henry Ford, if that was attributed to him, was right when he said that. I always say Henry Ford, it may have been someone else, but that's who I believe it was.
That's who I've heard it attributed to as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's the key, isn't it? A lot of people, they don't believe in their ability. They get themselves stuck in that way of thinking that's what they do. So I think it's about prioritizing, it's about mindset, it's about starting small, with the three things I heard there from you.
You summarized it better than I did.
There we go. That's it. I probably knew the answer as well. So it's so thinking about it, one of the other things that you and I often see in business owners is, and in scaling up, we talk about getting people on the bus, getting the right people on the bus with the right skills, the right attitude, with the right driver. Sometimes business owners don't want to give things up because they don't trust the team, because nobody's as good as me at doing this job because I've done it for 20 plus years. How do I trust people? So what advice have you got for those business owners who are facing this year? It's 2022 and they want to make that time. What advice could you give them around empowering people and relinquishing some of their own responsibilities to give it to other people?
Right. Again, there's lots of parts to that. They could just be flat out wrong, right? That there are people who are qualified and that they're underutilizing their team.
Yeah.
It could be that they don't have the right team, or perhaps they just haven't equipped them. Like, so what training and processes do you have in place to enable somebody else to do this as well as you can?
Yeah.
Possibly even better. But sometimes it's dispelling a bit of the value that they think they provide. I guess what I'm getting at is, most things, if somebody can do it 80% as good, it's usually going to be good enough. And I don't remember where I heard this. I think I got this analogy from another coach. He said, it's like, if there's somebody, maybe a classically trained cordon bleu chef comes over from France to the United States and applies to work at McDonald's. And they say, well, I'm a cordon bleu chef. I can make the best hamburger in all of the world, right? It's like, well, we still pay you what McDonald's pays you.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, like, the skill is too big for the job. The job doesn't warrant that. So I've had clients do a little exercise where they rank their primary responsibilities in the business. And on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the skill level like? And on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the replaceability?
Wow. Okay.
So just because you're a level 10 but maybe only a level 6 is warranted for that. And you could train someone to operate at that level.
Yeah.
But here comes back to the balance of dissatisfaction and vision, because what's going to drive them to make the changes is when they get really dissatisfied with what they're not doing instead.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right. So it's enough to be dissatisfied. So that's, I guess, the vision, in other words, the mirror image of that dissatisfaction is, I'm frustrated, I'm trapped in this. Well, I wish I was doing this instead.
Yeah.
And now I have to find a way to offload some of these things. And there's a little quadrant I use, like a kind of a 9 grid, on 2 axis, of where the vertical axis is enjoyment.
Okay.
And the horizontal axis is skill. And plot everything you do in here: low, medium, high skill, low, medium, and high enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, you only want to be working in the high skill and high enjoyment, where you can really add the most value to the business.
Yeah, yeah.
But the mistake a lot of founders make in particular is by trying to duplicate themselves. They think, I need another one of me. When in reality, the first thing that you need to do is get rid of all the stuff that's not worth your time, meaning the low skill or low enjoyment. So you actually start at the bottom left of that and kind of work your way up in an arc, right, to where you're only left with the top right. Yeah. And that's, but they underestimate that. It's like, but when you ask a question like, how many times have you stopped what you were doing because the printer jammed and now you're being the IT guy and you're not an IT guy, right? Or you kind of get sucked into these little things that aren't your job and you're not even that good at them, but you tell yourself it's not worth your time, or it's not worth the money. But when you add it all up, is that 3 or 5 or 10 hours of your week? And if you could buy back that time at a discount and then go reinvest it into higher value activities, will it more than pay for itself to hire or outsource or, get the right technology in place, whatever the solution is? And when you put it that way, you're like, okay, how much is your time worth? And you just told me that you spent 2 hours doing a $25 an hour job. You just cost yourself hundreds of dollars in the process. And really, like, let that pain sink in. Now they're more motivated.
I love that. And I think the one bit that you raised there, you raised a couple of things, and I've just drawn out your 9-box grid as you were talking there. That thing about costing your time. As a business owner, too few business owners know the value of their time. Or they've been stuck in the corporate mindset of, I'm paid 100,000 a year or whatever it might be, but they don't think about what it costs for every minute of their time because they've never had to think about it. So when you start running your own business and actually weighing up that time versus money, it's really easy to say, okay, this is going to take me 2 hours of my time. Every hour of my time is costing $150 or $150, whatever it is. Could I get someone else in to do it for $25? Yes, then get them to do it. But people don't think like that. And I love it. I used to work with a lovely man, and I'm still in touch with him now. And he often used to do all the little things that he shouldn't be doing. He was CFO of the business and he was a shareholder in the business. And I would often find him. And the funniest one was when the toilet blocked and I found him in there with his spanners trying to unblock the toilet. And I said, you can't be doing that. But he says, well, it will take me longer to tell someone else about it or get them to pick up the phone. He wasted 2 hours of his time unblocking a toilet in his office. He ran the business. And if you're listening to this, you know who you are.
There's probably a lot of people who feel guilty of that.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's the key one there, isn't it? So there's some key things there about, understanding the skill versus the enjoyment of doing it, understanding where you're adding value, and then looking at that value of time versus the cost of you getting someone else in to do it. So you can outsource some work or bring in other people to do it. The other bit, and I'd love to touch on this, and this is slightly flipping the conversation around in terms of this strategizing. So we talked about, vision for the end of the year and creating something out in the future to understand where are you going, but actually about creating a strategy and sticking to that plan. Because a lot of business owners don't. They start meandering through the year with some vague goals of what they want to achieve. And of course, they then achieve some vague goal at the end. And often they come back and say, hey, there's no point in me planning because I just don't know what's going to happen in the year. Something else might come along. COVID might stifle my business, or there might be something else that stops me doing it. So how do we contend with that as business coaches to help people who say, I can't plan because my business is unplannable? Any thoughts?
Well, it's making an assumption that a plan is set in stone and is rigid, which is not the case.
Yeah.
Right? This is why in scaling up, we plan quarterly. So we have our initiatives, our goals for the year, and even further on, 3 years, 5 years. BHAG might be going 10 to 25 years out.
Yeah.
But then quarterly, we're taking bite-sized chunks out of that and leaving room to course correct and navigate changes. And I personally think 90 days is about the ideal amount of time to plan. So you've got bigger goals and initiatives, but the plan itself is shorter term. So 90 days it's enough time to get stuff done, but it's also a short enough amount of time that you can reasonably see. Certainly unforeseen things could happen, but we feel a lot more comfortable saying we can kind of predict how the first quarter is going to go, and plan accordingly and make some course corrections. So the plan has to be a living, breathing document. A lot of my clients will keep their plans on paper.
Okay.
Mine is actually posted up just beyond my computer here. And I literally, I've done a lot of work digitally. There's more to it, but kind of the summary version is right there where I can look at it on a daily basis, cross things off, scratch it out, move it around. Like It's a mess by the end of the quarter. And I've learned the messier it is, the more got done. Because it was constantly looked at, it was prioritized, it was thought about. And so it's never perfect. Yeah. The 13 weeks don't usually go, not even usually, never go exactly as we predict, but does a heck of a lot more get done if we decide in advance this is what these 13 weeks are about? Absolutely. So when I do annual planning with my clients, we split it into two parts.
Okay.
There's strategic thinking is separate from execution planning. Okay. Right. So I'm doing this with a client next week. Most of my clients' annual plans are already done. We've got one lingering one we're doing next week. So we're spending the whole first day just on that bigger picture, those questions that they tend to dabble in and then they get hard to answer and then they move on and come back to the present day. So where are we really going? What are the 3 to 5 years that we want to achieve? Like, if we want to be there in 3 to 5 years, what must we start on now to get there? Like in this scaling up, we call these the chess moves, right? Because they're slow, right? They're slow and you don't get an instant result. You might be thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead before you're really going to make progress, but you've got to start on it now if you really want to be there over the long term. And then we work backwards. So that's where we want to be in a few years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, however far they can see. Like, now let's rein it in and say, okay, what does 2022 need to be about? What key initiatives do we need to be focused on this year? And then back it in one step closer. What do we need the first quarter to be about? Yeah,
I love that. So there's two. There's the strategic thinking, asking the hard questions that we often, as you say, dabble in and they get hard answers. We don't do anything with it. And then it comes down to the execution planning of specifically what are we going to be doing within that quarter or within that period of time. Yeah. And so now is a good time to be doing it, but actually a lot of people should have been doing their strategic planning in the end of the previous quarter or getting that done at the back end of 2021. But as they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So you might as well get on it. So if you haven't done it, do it now, I think is the big bit of advice.
Not too late.
Yeah, exactly. So I love that bit of advice there. Anything else you would suggest? What's the other key thing that business owners need to be doing right now? It's the beginning of 2022. We've been through a hell of a 19, 20 months over the last year around the world. Any other thoughts you've got that you're sharing with your business owners, your clients at the moment to say, hey, this is where you need to be thinking that comes to mind for you?
Focus on the team.
Yeah, okay.
Probably for you the same in the UK, but here in the United States, unemployment is low, right? Finding and retaining great talent is as challenging as ever. So we have a phenomenon here that I think is maybe not global, but widespread, called the Great Resignation, right?
Yeah.
Where loads of people they're quitting their jobs or questioning their career path or their life in general. And is this where I want to live? And is this what I want to do? And so as a leader, you want to be proactive with your team and make sure they're happy, they're satisfied, focus on retaining the A-level employees versus I guess the tendency is to focus on the B or C level employees that need the most help or the biggest pain in the rear. And in the process, maybe risk losing touch with some of the A's. So involve them in the goals, let them know like the contribution that they're making. And some of the primary drivers of job satisfaction are a sense of contribution, right? That they know that what they do matters, that it's appreciated, that it's making an impact, that their opinion is valued, that their skills are being utilized. And I'll frequently run surveys of my clients' teams. And one of the questions I ask, not on every survey, but very regularly I ask is, do you feel that your skills are being fully utilized and appreciated in your current role?
Lovely.
And the answer is far and away no, like maybe to no, right? They all know they've got more to give, that they're capable of more. Is it this kind of untapped potential that hopefully all humans know about ourselves is we've got more to give. So if you can be the leader that can tap into that can challenge them in a good and rewarding way, involve them in the bigger picture purpose of achieving the company goals, not just to make you more money, but to fulfill the greater purpose of the business. Now you've got alignment, right? Now you've got momentum, you've got engagement. And that in and of itself will put you head and shoulders ahead of your competition.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. And I think that's a lovely way to segue to one thing I was going to say. So, Karie, you've got lots of YouTube videos, and I was on my spin bike this morning, as I do regularly to maximize my time. So I would get my legs turning while I'm learning at the same time. So I was watching some of your videos.
Nice, I like that.
And one of your videos I was watching is about, are you the smartest person in the room? I think you called it. And I think it was a video from some time ago that you'd done. But I think that some of the questions there is to making sure as a business owner, you don't need to be the smartest person in the room. And that's all about involving your team, getting them to open up so you can see the skill set of the people around you, not feeling as business owner, I have to be the smartest person. And the key bit there is coming back to our earlier conversation. If you're the smartest person, you'll feel like you've always got to be doing, you'll feel like you've got to have to be doing everything in the business. But you've got a great team of people, so let them do the work. So I think that's a really interesting point there about, focusing on the team, because that frees up your time. And then you can go into all those things you want to be doing, whether it's surfing or flying the plane, running the marathon, whatever you do, you've got time to do it when you focus on the team. So I think it's a great one. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So we're coming towards the end of our conversation now. And I mentioned about your YouTube videos. Where can people find you? Obviously, you're based in San Diego, the US based. How can people find you if they want to hook up and find out a bit about what you do?
Yeah. So if you know how to spell my name, I'm pretty easy to find.
I will put it in
Karie,
the show notes.
Put it in the show notes. But yeah, so that's my website is kariekaufmann.com. So I'm also very active on LinkedIn, even on Instagram or Facebook. So wherever you like to engage, you can pretty much find me there. I'm not super active on Twitter, but the rest of them you'll find me pretty regularly. So yeah, I'd love to connect with your listeners and answer any questions or follow-ups or even hear people's greatest takeaway. I'd love to hear that as well. This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I talked over you just now, but if I just spell your name, Karie, K-A-R-I-E, and then Kaufmann, K-A-U-F-M-A-N-N, for people looking there. So kariekaufmann.com for people who want to go and check it out. But thank you. It's been a great conversation. One final question for you, and this is, I'm looking for a short answer, a long one. If you could go back to the Karie of 2005, setting up your coaching business, what's the one bit of advice you'd give yourself?
Oh.
I said quick question. Maybe that was a long question for a long answer.
I think the short answer is be patient with myself. That is, looking back now over my business, there's benefits that I have that I only have due to time. It just takes time to have clients build amazing businesses and sell them. And I, get to share in their success or their, excitement of that, or to have a CEO contact me and say, I've been watching your videos for 4 years and I finally decided I'm ready. Like, you just need time for those things to transpire. So plant the seeds, they take a while to grow.
Yeah.
So this would be my advice for any business owner, coach or otherwise. Plant the seeds, water them, nurture them, be a little bit patient. There's a difference in hunting and farming, right? And this is business is mostly about farming. Sometimes you got to move quick and make quick moves in order to eat.
Yeah.
But if you really focus on the planting, you don't just get the one meal, you get the orchard, you get the harvest continually. So I'd tell myself to be a bit more patient.
I love that. What a lovely end to it. So thank you, Karie Kaufmann. Thank you very much. Great answer. And that be patient with yourself. And the bit about success takes time. Plant the seeds now. So thank you, Karie. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you.